When the genocide started, when the majority of the Hutus were killing the Tutsis, my family was a part of the Tutsi tribe, and so that's why we're being killed.
Alex Sinjamana was only about 6 years old at the time of the Rwandan genocide in 1994. But it's an experience he's likely never to forget.
And I remember just slipping and falling to the ground and this noise just whizzing by my head. And I happened to realize that noise had whizzed by my head because I slipped and fell. That noise was a bullet and missed my head just by an inch because I had slipped in a cow pie.
Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve?
You heard Alex right. God used manure to save his life.
On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons.
We're honored to have Alex Sinjamana as our guest on this episode of GPS, God, People, Stories. I'm Jim Kirkland.
And I'm Phil Fleischman. Today, Alex Sinjamana lives in the United States, and he works for our sister ministry, Operation Christmas Child. He recently shared his story with the staff here at the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and that is what we are going to share with you on this episode of GPS.
And after we hear Alex's story, we're going to share some comments Franklin Graham made while the Rwandan genocide was still going on. He was part of a Samaritan's Purse team that was caring for people during the violence.
You'd go through villages. There was no people, not even a chicken, not even a goat, not even a bird. The villages were there. The people were gone.
But God was there, and God is with you no matter what you're going through. If you'd like to know more, visit this website, findpeacewithgod.net. That's findpeacewithgod.net.
And just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated. Every child has a dream to belong and be loved. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty.
GPS.
God,
People, Stories.
Rwanda, a small country in Central Africa where Alex Sinjamana was born.
And as a little boy, I never knew who my father was. And I had a great relationship with my grandmother because my mother had passed away due to HIV/AIDS when I was very little, so I never got a chance to know my mother. But as growing up and with my grandmother, just that connection and that love, at a point when that relationship was continuing to even grow, that's when a tragedy took place in the country of Rwanda, and that's the Rwandan genocide.
The Rwandan genocide lasted about 100 days, from April 7th to mid-July of 1994. In that span of time, hundreds of thousands of Rwandans were murdered. Some observers put the death toll at 500,000, some at 800,000, some at more than 1 million.
And while the exact number of dead may not be known, what is known is that the vast majority of those killed belong to the Tutsi tribe, and those doing the killing belong to the Hutu tribe.
When the genocide started, when the majority of the Hutus were killing the Tutsis, my family was a part of the Tutsi tribe, and so that's why we're being killed. And I remember one morning on April 7th when we woke up, and we would hear these noises from a distance, and we didn't know what the noise were. And our neighbor came to us and told us, hey, the president of Rwanda was assassinated last night. Do not leave the house because Tutsis are being killed everywhere. And as my grandmother hears this, she wonders what would happen of the whole family, so she told us to hide. And we hid for that morning, and it was late afternoon. We came back to our house, and we were attacked by militias, and they told us to go outside and lie down. And that's when they would take my grandmother's life. And these militias would come back later looking for my uncle. But they would leave, they searched all over the house and they couldn't find him. But it was 3 days later, they came back and they said, he's under the bed, let him get out. And that's when he would come out and they would ask for his identity card. And at the age of 18 and older, you had to have this identity card. And this identity card said what tribe you were. And of course, there was no question they would also take his life. As a 6-year-old, just watching this happen, we were wondering why in the world would a neighbor who we knew by name, a neighbor who we went to school with their kids, and a neighbor who we loved actually, would all of a sudden turn their backs on us. And so we're just lost.
When Alex says we're just lost, he's referring to his brother and sister and himself. They fled their home and went to stay with an aunt in a nearby city. But they weren't safe there either, and they ended up on the run for about 2 months.
And while we're running, there were many incidences that were happening that we could have lost our lives. And I remember one specific moment when I was running, about 2,000 people running. And we ran and we heard these noises and we're being literally shot from all directions. And I remember just slipping and falling to the ground and this noise just whizzing by my head. And I happened to realize that noise had whizzed by my head because I slipped and fell. That noise was a bullet and missed my head just by an inch because I had slipped in a cow pie. I don't know about you, but there's nothing glamorous about a cow pie. But that's what God used to save my life. So I look in that moment. I didn't have a relationship with Him. I didn't have that understanding. And so when I look back and realize what a powerful God we serve, a God who works in mysterious ways and a God who works in gross ways. Which sometimes we don't like to see the gross part that He works, but He does. And so at the end of this war, that's when I was put in an orphanage by that aunt who I was living with. Her and her husband passed away not too long after the war. And so while we're in this orphanage with 250 other kids, all of us recalling everything. Now that we're not running physically, our minds were running. And we're starting to process everything that we had gone through. And with that came post-traumatic stress. In the night, it was so scary to go to bed because a lot of the kids were just screaming out of scaredness and out of nightmares they were having.
Let down, lonely now, staring out into the crowd, wondering will a daddy arrive? Every heart, everywhere, needs a hand to hold them when they're scared in the darkest night.
While Alex was living at the orphanage, the ministry Samaritan's Purse delivered Operation Christmas Child shoe boxes to all the children. One of Alex's favorite items in his box was a hair comb. He says he carried it with him everywhere he went. His box also contained a story about Jesus, just like every other Operation Christmas Child shoebox does.
The orphanage director used those stories to help Alex and the other children learn more about Jesus. A year later, Alex joined a traveling children's choir, and his interest in Jesus began to grow.
I was in Uganda learning English, and I remember just so hungry for God's word, but I didn't understand much English, and I was just trying to translate a lot of the message, and I was just bitter and angry towards the people who did this to my family. And I was starting to ask God, why me? Why did I survive the genocide? And why am I special than any of the kids who didn't make it through the war? If you loved me very much, why would you watch while my grandmother and my uncle are being taken away from me? How can you stand and watch while 1 million of your children are being killed? How can that be? And I was just so lost, and I was blaming Him for everything that happened in my life. And in me blaming Him, I missed out on seeing the miracles that He actually did.
But Alex's eyes were opened as he read the Bible.